and international influence. You understand this better than most, your professional background in banking, the dominance of the dollar at this point. How worried are you about the point he's making that certainly China and Russia are rooting for the dollar to fail for us to continue to have financial instability and uncertainty here in the U.S.?
Listen, I'm very concerned about China and what Russia are doing, but the solution is not just massive borrowing and massive spending. That's no solution. That's putting your head in the sand, and that's actually going to lead us to a much greater crisis down the road. Listen, I know we just talked about the border, but new problem, same issues. And the same issue is Joe Biden doesn't lead. Joe Biden doesn't have a plan. Joe Biden doesn't have a strategy. And what Joe Biden brings America to every single time is a crisis point. 100 days ago, House Republicans started crafting together a solution to bring our spending down to pre-COVID spending levels and also preparing to raise the nation's debt ceiling by $1.5 trillion. We passed that plan a couple weeks ago. Do you know what Joe Biden and the Democrats were doing? Nothing. They did nothing except run to the cameras and say we should just pass a clean debt ceiling. Any family and any business in our country understands you cannot just continue to spend massive amounts of money and then borrow massive amounts of money and there will be no consequences. Every American family has already seen the first consequence from Joe Biden, and that is a massive inflation that has been the most insidious tax the American people have seen, whether you're rich or poor, whether you're black or white, whether you're Republican or Democrat. It has come for everybody. So to this Democrat staffer who doesn't have the courage to share their name, I would say sit down and be fiscally responsible. Don't go and hide behind a reporter throwing out your talking points, because you're not being honest and you're not telling the truth.
So on the issue of consequences, on this issue of default, which we're told is coming potentially within days if there's not a deal, former President Trump, whom you've endorsed, had this to say on Wednesday night.
I say to the Republicans out there, congressmen, senators, if they don't give you massive cuts, you're going to have to do a default.
The current president says this about default: it would erase millions of jobs, trigger a recession, hit retirement accounts, and increase borrowing costs. It's not an option. So is it an option or not? Which president do you agree with?
Well, look, I will tell you right now, President Trump is a master negotiator. I don't know what Joe Biden's ever done to negotiate anything of substance. Let's be very clear, Shannon. You're going to have to curtail spending. Joe Biden wants to spend $7 trillion. That's his budget. We only take in about $4.2 to $4.5 trillion in taxes. So he wants to massively spend money we don't have. He wants to massively borrow and think there are no consequences. And like I just said, inflation is the consequence for every American under Joe Biden's reckless policy. So the House position is very clear. Let's go to pre-COVID spending levels. Everybody understands why we had to ratchet up spending to respond to the pandemic. We all get that. But the pandemic is now over. It's time to bring spending levels back to pre-COVID, and then we can talk about raising the debt ceiling. And frankly, not even talk about it, Republicans have passed that plan. If Joe Biden brings nothing to the table, if all he does is sit there with his hands in his pockets and not understanding what he has done and a way to actually negotiate, then he is the one leading our nation into default. And it's a very sad thing to see. Last thing on this, there's a proposal that has been floating around Congress about payment prioritization. What Treasury can do is pay interest and principal on our debt first. That would actually stave off all this concern of this default. And then we can pay Social Security, Medicare, pay for our military, and then go down the line. If Democrats want to continue to run so many of the agencies that they've basically put a bunch of their crazy policies into, then they have to find a way to bring spending down with Republicans so we can raise the nation's debt ceiling going forward.